Hello and welcome to Take 6. I'm streaming executive producer Thomas Mates. Julie Broughton is out on assignment today. She will be back tomorrow. We've got a big show for you today. We are going to take a deep dive on the remainder of the tropics season. The remainder of the hurricane season and what's going on in the tropics. We'll also take a look at the rising river levels that are happening across Central Florida that are still causing problems for people all over along the St. Johns River and beyond. But before that, we are going to be talking about this election season. Obviously, we are just days away from Election Day, November 5th, and a lot of people have some very serious concerns about the about their vote and how the vote will be counted. This is something that became very prominent during the 2020 election when former President Donald Trump, was making false claims about the elections being rigged, about the votes being counted improperly. Of course, none of those ended up being unfounded. But of course, election integrity is more than just a one-sided issue, is a bipartisan issue. Everyone wants to know that their vote is going to be counted and counted accurately. So to explore that further, we are going to be joined by News 6 investigator Lewis Bolden. Lewis, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Thomas. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Now, Lewis, you recently got the chance to sit down with supervisors of election from several counties across Central Florida, all dealing with the same thing right now, and that is making sure that the votes will be counted safely and accurately. And they are up against it this year because of all those issues I just talked about before. People really have their eye on these supervisors of election, correct?
Right, that is right, Thomas. And first, I want to say it's nice to see you sitting in that chair.
Oh, thank you.
And we have all had to make a big shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
We go from storm coverage that just consumed all of our attention, and then it's like, oh yeah, we've got this very important thing called an election coming up. So
yeah, it's going to be
get back on track.
All gas, no brakes until Election Day.
Exactly. So yeah, we sat down with 5 supervisors of elections from across Central Florida. We had from Volusia County, Lake, Seminole, Orange, and Osceola County. And we really wanted to talk to them about the climate right now and their concerns. And we started off this interview by asking them to describe their feelings about the upcoming election in one word. Most of them did it in one word. Some of them did it in 2 words. But we got some really interesting responses from optimism. In fact, the piece that is airing today, I named optimism to anxiety, because that's really what they were all feeling when we interviewed all of them, just like this whole spectrum of feelings.
Yeah.
And one person said that they were excited. Another person said that they were anxious, and that opened an entire conversation around anxiety, as you can imagine.
Yes. And what exactly, I mean, I think we all have probably a pretty good idea, but what exactly is spurring that anxiety for them? In their own words, what did they say was the thing that's kind of giving them pause, keeping them up at night a little bit?
Well, they basically said it started in 2020 with the big lie, right? And it has continued from there. And they have experienced everything from Chris Anderson in Seminole County saying he had received death threats before. Others said they didn't quite want to say threats, but they said they've received much more intimidation. So they get intimidating phone calls and emails. And, basically, just shy of threatening them. And they said they have concern for their poll workers because people are, you know how it is. People are polarized when it comes to politics, and people are very strong about their opinions. And so they said some of their poll workers have expressed concern, and they've taken all of the precautions that they can take. Of course, they don't want to get too heavily into that, but they said they have definitely taken some precautions.
Definitely. And I know that a lot of them are kind of taking the tact that the cure for all this is going to be as transparent as possible, making the process as open to people so that people can see it, so that people can't question whether anything happened in a back room somewhere that no one saw. What are some of the steps that people are taking to make this process as open and available to the public as possible?
They are all about transparency, all of them, and they always have been from the way that their rooms are made,
Mm-hmm.
the buildings that they're in, how they're designed. They're all designed with transparency in mind. You know, Lisa Lewis from Volusia County was talking about when they are counting votes, everything is happening, they're in one big room.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anyone from the public who wants to come and watch the process is always welcome to do that. And in fact, they say they encourage people to do that, particularly election deniers.
Mm-hmm.
They said that one of the ways to get through to election deniers is to have them come down to volunteer to be a poll worker. And they say going through that process and seeing all of the steps in place is really what convinces people that elections in Florida are safe and secure.
Yeah, and these are by and large people who have been in these jobs for years. I think we were talking a little bit beforehand. We'd said like Alan Hayes in Lake County has been at it for about 28 years. So I'm sure that he has seen everything that can happen during an election cycle, during an election count, and I'm sure he has a contingency plan for any problems that might arise.
Yeah, absolutely. They have contingencies on top of contingencies on top of
Mm-hmm.
contingencies. And yes, Hayes has been around for 28 years. And the good thing about him, I was telling you this earlier, Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
there is something that happens when they have been in a position that amount of time. They don't care. All
Mm-hmm.
right. So he is not trying to be diplomatic. He will say exactly what is on his mind. And he was very adamant that they don't care
Mm-hmm.
what party you belong to, who you vote for. They could not care less. They want you to cast your ballot. They want to count it and then
Mm-hmm.
show you the results. So we also talked to them about party affiliation with their positions, and they
Mm-hmm.
all said it really does not matter at all to
Yeah.
them. Whether they all belong to a party, but they say it really doesn't matter to them at all who people vote for or which party you belong to.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, Florida has a bit of a history with counting election ballots and results. We all remember the 2000 election cycle, but this is something that is happening in states all across the country. People taking that close look, really putting the microscope on election counts. And I know in Georgia, their election board there recently pushed for a rule of a hand count of every ballot in the state, which is going to be very time consuming. And I know that you brought this up to the election supervisors that we had present, and they had feelings about that.
They had very strong feelings about it. First of all, I want to go back to 2000,
Mm-hmm.
and I think my takeaway from 2000 was hanging chads. I had never
Yes.
heard of hanging chads, but we heard that so much. They were adamant about the voting by hand. No, in fact, Alan Hayes said if it comes to that in Florida, that he will not run
Mm-hmm.
again, that he will be done, because he says there is too much margin for error with counting by hand. And they all agreed that machines are much better at counting than people are when you're talking about that number of ballots. So none of them are in
Mm-hmm.
favor of that at all.
Yeah, I mean, we all have probably tried to calculate change in our head real quick at a cash register before, and you know how
And I'm
inaccurate
often
that can
wrong.
be. Exactly. Why would you leave, the vote of the people to that chance, the fallibility of a person, just trying to keep track of a number. And like you're in a room, like you said, a small room with a bunch of other people, probably also counting by hand. One person says 6, 7, 8, next to you, and then that gets in your head, and who knows what happens from there.
Exactly.
The machines are just doing what they are programmed to do,
Hmm.
which is count the ballot. So yeah, I can definitely see how the prospect of that, especially for someone like Alan Hayes, who's been doing this nearly 30 years and just has seen the progress from where we were to the machine count now. I'm sure it would be daunting for anyone to imagine, let alone in a state like Florida where we have the third highest population in the country.
Right, right. And one of the things I wanted to, you asked about transparency earlier. Orange County is very proud of this. They have started a live stream. They say they were definitely the first in the state, and possibly the first in the country to do a live stream of the process. And they say that has helped with just people being on the front lines and seeing the entire process. That's helped people. Have more faith in elections. And here's the thing: Florida, our governor, after 2020, you can go back and find all of the sound bites from our governor saying 2020 was one of the most secure elections in Florida history. So all of this talk from the former president about what did and didn't happen, it's simply not true. It's simply not true.
Absolutely. Well, we have you'll have a story on this coming up tonight. The first piece of a couple, I believe, at least two pieces, correct? And that's coming up tonight, starting at 6 o'clock, correct?
Yes, it's going to be a total of three pieces. So
Three
we've got
pieces.
one today, we've got one on Thursday, and then we have another one next week. And we didn't plan on that. We sat down with all of them. First of all, we have to give a shout out to Ashley for wrangling all of them, because you can imagine with their schedules, it was difficult to get all of them sitting down in one place. But yeah, we had so much material from it. We sat down with them for about 45 minutes, and there was so much to talk about that we split it up into three different pieces. So yeah, one tonight at 6 and 6:30 and 11, and then another one on Thursday, another next week.
Yes, and then as you said, you guys spoke for about 45 minutes. We managed to condense that down to about 25 minutes, and that will be airing as a special tonight on News 6 Plus, right at 7 o'clock, right after News 6 at 6:30. So we hope you'll stick around for that. Of course, you'll see more of those conversations in Lewis's pieces over the coming days. And of course, like I said, it's going to be all gas, no brakes as we barrel towards Election Day on November 5th. We're going to have continuous coverage from now until then, touching on everything you need to know, not just the presidential election, but also Senate races, local elections, any ballot measures. It's all going to be there. I know, Lewis, you're going to have a big role to play in all of that coverage. I'm sure you're looking forward to it.
Listen, what are you going to do? It's election night, but
Exactly.
there's so much on the ballot, and it really is an exciting time. And these supervisors of elections, they did not hold back. Nothing was off limits. They were very candid. They showed up and were engaged in the conversation. So it's definitely worth the watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, it's not that they care how people vote, just that they vote, and that the vote is counted and counted accurately. That is why they are allowed to be as candid as they are, because they don't have a partisanship role to play in this. It is just the numbers for them.
They don't have a horse in the race at all.
Exactly.
Chris Anderson said he was really concerned about voter apathy. And I said, voter apathy when there's so much on the ballot? And he said, yes, because he saw a significant decline in voters from 2016 to 2020, and that concerned him. So he's concerned now, will people actually come out? I was surprised about that, because there's so much on the ballot. Like, why anybody would ever stay home, I don't know anyway. But
yeah, exactly. It's a thing you hear all the time. It's like, oh, my one vote doesn't matter, but it absolutely does. Your vote is extremely important. It is how you have your voice heard by our representatives. And but it is the biggest choice that people make on election day, not between candidate A and candidate B, but between the voting booth and the couch. And I genuinely hope that everyone chooses the voting booth this coming election day, no matter how you decide to vote, no matter what you're voting for, what's motivating you to vote. Just important that you vote.
absolutely. And listen, I'm a black man. People have lost their lives for the right to vote. Show up to vote.
Yes.
That's it.
Absolutely. We stand on the backs of everyone who came before us, who fought for not just our individual freedoms, but the freedoms of just everyone of every race, creed, and color to go out and have their voices heard.
Yep, absolutely. And these guys are making sure that these elections are safe and that they are accurate and that they are secure. So do it with confidence.
Yeah, make sure their hard work pays off. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Lewis. We'll see you tonight at 6, and then we'll look forward to more of your coverage in the coming days.
Okay, Thomas, enjoyed it. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. All right, and we are going to take a quick break. Coming up after the break, we're going to have digital meteorologist David Nazario joining us from the Digital Weather Center to look at the home stretch of the hurricane season, river levels as they are rising across our area, and some are coming down, fortunately. And of course, we will take a look at your local weather as well. That'll be coming up in about 2 minutes. Thank you very much. All right, right now we are taking a live look at Daytona Beach. It is a gorgeous day out there, and it's a really gorgeous day all across Central Florida. Thank you for joining us again today. I am streaming executive producer Thomas Mates. This is Take 6. Right now, we are going to be talking all about the weather. As I said, it's beautiful out there right now. We're getting a small cold front coming through the area this week, and temperatures are going to stay nice and cool, but of course, not everything is perfect, let's say. We still are dealing with a lot of issues from Hurricane Milton that came through our area last week, and that includes some rising river levels all across our area. For a closer look at that, we're going to be joined now by digital meteorologist David Nazario. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Tom. How about yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. But I know it's not the case for everybody. As I said, with these rising river levels, some people are concerned about flooding or more flooding in their neighborhoods and their homes. What can you tell us about what's going on right now with those rising waters?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we get started with the show, this is a look at our latest river levels. Almost got tongue-tied there. I might need a little more caffeine as we get rocking to the second half of the day. So this is a look at our latest river levels across Central Florida, our viewing area particularly. And you can see, especially right along the St. John's, that's the one that stands out to me most. We are still in major flood status. And I will go ahead and walk everybody tuning in right now through the stages that we're currently in for some of our heavy hitter locations out there, particularly around the St. John's, as well as other areas getting closer to Pinellas and Hillsborough County. You can see a couple of the areas down there, those little pink dots near Palm Harbor, Tampa, and Bayonet Point are also still in a major flood stage. So let's go ahead and roll forward with the show. Let's see here, go ahead. So this is going to be the Little Wekiva River near Altamont Springs. And you can see, thankfully, we are only in the action phase. And if you didn't happen to catch our article that we just published yesterday, as a matter of fact, essentially what action phase means, we are not seeing any flooding as of right now. And thankfully, we are not expected to see it. As you can see, the trend here, the forecast over the next few days is expected to continue to go down. And the action phase essentially means have flood precautions in place. So you're not dealing with flooding. It's not a flood warning. This is kind of like a flood watch, if you will. The difference between a watch and a warning. Watch being could happen, not expected. Warning means expected and imminent, so be prepared. So you can see here that that's going to be for Little Wekiva. As we transition on over to St. John's at Astor, you can see we are still in the flood stage, the major flood stage. This was actually the location that had set the record. You can see the record on the right-hand side, 4.71 feet. We were actually all the way up to, I believe, 4.8, 4.9 at the peak of the St. John's River. Wow. We are still seeing just a little bit of that inundation, still seeing a bit of an increase as we go through Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then finally beginning to taper off by Saturday, which is fairly unfortunate, to tell you the truth. This major flood stage is going to be sticking around at least for another 4 to 7 days, pending what else happens in the weather. Here's a look at the St. John's River near DeLand. We did not set a record here, thank goodness, but we're still in that major flood stage. Expected to stay right around the same, if not go up ever so slightly, nudge the water level ever so slightly as we get into the weekend, which is not good, never a good thing to see, so the flood conditions will stay in effect. Here's the St. John's River near Sanford. As you can see, we're kind of moving down. We're kind of going down the east side of Florida at this point. We are actually in the moderate flood stage. So again, to kind of give you all some situational awareness, as I like to say, let my military come out for a second, some situational awareness on the different stages. So action, as we all know, is kind of just a watch. We're watching and waiting, but be prepared. Minor would be that we are expecting the water to come up and could cause some flooding, some submerging of certain people, certain areas, certain places in the area. And when I say people, I mean just your homes. We could see some water coming in to your property, but not a lot. We have the moderate flood stage, which means we will likely see flood damage, flooding into properties, businesses, offices, your homes, your vehicles, anything you may have outside near a flood-prone area. Major being there's flooding widespread. This is where you start to see the catastrophic damage. It's just more or less a disaster, so to speak, in that general area. So you can see we've come down a little bit near to the Sanford area, which is good news. And then last but certainly not least, the St. John's River at Astor, dare I say, still in a major flood stage, came very close to the record. Still haven't seen the full maximum level of the water just yet. We're looking to realize that as we go into tomorrow morning and through the rest of the day on Wednesday. And then hopefully, because we're going to be continuing to dry out over central Florida, we're going to start to see these waters go down slowly but surely, and hopefully within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, get back to a state of normalcy and out of these flood stages altogether. And so with that being said,
if I could
go
just,
ahead, John, or Tom.
So if I could, though, just try and pull that nugget of potentially good news out of all that, because it does sound a little gloomy as a forecast for the people dealing with that flooding. But it seems as though once we get past the weekend, that's when we'll just start to see a widespread receding of those water levels, at least as long as the weather holds out for us.
Exactly. That was exactly where I was going to begin to segue, kind of touch on that good news. So as we go over the next few days, and especially into this weekend, when you noticed our forecast models were starting to show that recession of the water levels, it's because we're looking pretty phenomenal out there across our viewing area. Some high cloud, maybe some leftover scattered showers down into the immediate southernmost tip of Florida. You can see down there near Miami, Coral Springs, Key West. We have some tropical-like storms and showers that are brewing up from the Florida Straits, from northern Cuba, trying to get into the Florida Peninsula. But these are going to stay well to the south of those areas currently afflicted by the flooding. So we're not looking at adding any insult to injury or throwing any salt in the wound in terms of Mother Nature not cooperating with us. We're actually going to stay dry and get another really solid shot of dry air here momentarily to reinforce what you were mentioning, Thomas. Here's a quick look at the radar right now. Nothing out there in terms of rain. We are pretty much skies clear, maybe some few clouds at best, some small fair weather cumulus at best, mid to upper level cloud cover. May not even see any cumulus out there. I know yesterday the cumulus was kind of going off, same thing with the day before, but we've just been continuously drying out pretty much all levels of our atmosphere to Florida, and as a result, the sun has been shining, the sun has been nice, it's been cooperative, it hasn't been blistering hot, and that dry air is helping to keep our humidity down as well, so the heat indexes have not been too terrible either. And then on another positive note, to kind of reinforce the good news, we went in with the bad. Unfortunately, flooding has been catastrophic for many. Milton caused a lot of it. The leftover rainfall, the preliminary rainfall before Milton definitely did not do us any favors. But as you can see right now, as the chart stipulates, power outages are very quickly going back to normal, and we're starting to see areas dropping off the chart altogether. You can see Putnam County, they're squared away, good to go. Marion County, Flagler, Sumter, and Lake, and Seminole County, as a matter of fact, right in hot pursuit with clearing out these power outages. Polk's still sitting at about 1,000, same thing with Orange County and Volusia, and then Hillsborough County is still kind of up there in that 5 to 25,000 threshold, but they are quickly also getting back on their feet as well, which is excellent news. We're getting the restoration pretty much almost finalized and should be wrapped up. I would anticipate at the rate we've been going, if I were to do a little meteorological extrapolation, as it's called, just take it forward in time, we should be good to go by next week.
A huge relief for people.
Here's a quick look. It is very much so, very much so. We're getting back to normal. And we're going to talk tropics in a second because I actually have good news to get you in that realm as well when we get into that department momentarily.
We'll take all the good news we can get.
Oh, 100%. Fully agree with you. I fully agree with you, especially here in terms of the studio, kind of cranking back the workload a little bit, making our lives, all of us, easy, spreading the good news across the spectrum. This is going to continue that same note. We're looking at dry, cool conditions as we go through today and through the rest of the week. If you saw earlier as the chart began to roll forward, you saw that second dose of brown, dusty, dry, well, not dusty, excuse me. I'm so used to saying that because of the tropics, but dry, crisp air, fall weather coming down from up north. That's going to reinforce the cool conditions and the calm conditions we have down here. It is going to get a little windy, nothing too crazy. It'll be a little breezy, but that's to be expected with the entry of a front like this. And now, with that being said, if you did not catch us for our Tropics Watch, myself and News 6 meteorologist Jonathan Kagis last night at around 8 o'clock local time, we're going to move into a little bit of a tropical update as we get ready to get towards the back end of our weather segment here. So I bring this up, and I love to emphasize this and show it to you all because if you look, and I'll actually fade us in just a little bit closer, typically we're used to seeing peak hurricane season September. And most of the time, as we all know, especially for us Floridians or anywhere that's been affected by hurricanes, what do you typically think when you hear hurricane season? August, September. But we've actually had pretty immense activity for the month of October, and we were pretty much dead in the water for the latter half of October, or not October, excuse me, August and into September. We had maybe a named storm or two, but we didn't have nearly as many as we saw very tail end of September and especially into October with 3, 4, 5 named storms on the map at the same time. If we continue on forward here, let me go ahead and change my screen over. We'll go on to what I call the tropical hotspots here. There we go. So the reason I have this up as well, this is courtesy of Climate Prediction Center. Now, don't let the name fool you. We call it hotspots to avoid calling it the scientific terminology that Climate Prediction Center uses when populating or producing these charts for us to then communicate to you all. Essentially, all this is where we're going to be watching for future tropical activity. It doesn't mean that we're guaranteed any storms, guaranteed any hurricanes, especially during this time frame, the 16th through the 22nd of this month. This chart will go valid tomorrow. We're going to be watching down there in the Caribbean as we get deeper and deeper into the fall. This is typically where, historically speaking, we will see tropical cyclones begin to form up if the conditions are right. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well, spend some time digesting that. We're going to get away from Cabo Verde season or the long track season that we're very familiar with in the months of August and September. We do still have a couple of waves out there in Invest 94L that I want to talk about as well, but nothing of any major concern to us here in the Central Florida area, thank goodness. So here is our development chances courtesy of National Hurricane Center. This is overlaid on our pinpoint accurate lovely graphic here for the eye candy. It's just so much more visually appealing. Invest 94L is that blob of thunderstorm activity in the central Atlantic. Currently, National Hurricane Center is fairly low confidence that it will actually organize into a named storm over the next 2 days, but they've nudged our development chances to 60% over the next 7 days. So as we go over the next week, we'll have to continue to watch whether or not this feature actually does get its act together. It's battling dry air and sinking air out there over the Atlantic and is forecast to track off towards the west. Now, The reason I also have the surface analysis pulled up, if you look over the east coast of the United States, getting down into the Gulf of Mexico and northern Florida, we have that blue line, that cold front. That's going to be our force field to stop 94L from trying to get anywhere closer to us in our viewing area. It's kind of a shame, to tell you the truth. I'm noticing on social media, and I know other members of the Pinpoint Weather team will testify to this, there's a lot of unofficial social media sources out there saying that Nadine is coming, Nadine is going to hit, next hurricane for Florida. And I'll tell you right now, to continue to push and hammer that good news home, Nadine is not coming for us. Nadine's not even on the board. And right now, even if it were, we don't have the pattern in place to potentially put Florida under the gun. We have that small blip down there in the Western Caribbean, an 0 for 30 shot of development, not really expecting anything. We got some good rain and storms firing down there. So unfortunately, Central America will have to do battle with some potential flood and hazardous conditions due to that, but not really expected to take on named storm status, which is great news. We'll continue to roll the clock forward here. We'll take a look at the Invest 94 spaghetti plots. And at first glance, it does look a little concerning. It's like, well, hey, you just said it's not coming towards Florida. Well, it's going to get closer. But then if you look at the satellite as well, you see how back to the left-hand side of the chart here, you have all the brown shades, the darker shades, the blacks over the southeast, and the brownish shades showing up over Florida. That's our force field. That's that protective blister that's going to stop this thing from coming any further towards the west-northwest. And as you can see towards the end of the spaghetti models, it actually dips towards the south. Bit of an unusual track. We don't typically see that, but that's thankfully because of that force field. So for Jonathan and I, we have our work cut out for us, keeping our folks down there in the Lesser and Greater Antilles ahead of the storm and keeping them updated, since we have a lot of lovely viewers down in that neck of the woods. But in terms of us here in Florida, we can all take a deep breath. We're not tracking anything of any immediate concern over the next 7, and I'd argue probably the next 2 weeks, 7 to 14 days. I love to show this as well. This is a wonderful and colorful graphic showing our European probabilities for formation. And the main reason I like to pull this up is not only is it showing us what the models are thinking could be a hotspot for some tropical juice, but it also shows in a colorful fashion where these things may track. And you can see as soon as it gets closer to the Turks and Caicos, Hispaniola, eastern Cuba, it takes a dip off towards the south, where you see those greens and the yellows and the blues. You have those darker shades of blues ejecting up towards Bermuda. But again, the key takeaway here is we're really not going to see any kind of action in our neck of the woods, which is excellent news for those still underway in their recovery process and trying to get back to that state of normalcy post not only Helene, but then we just had Milton as well. So again, just want to take us in a little bit closer. You can see those probabilities diminish pretty quickly, and Florida is in the clear. Moving right along, let's get over to the next chart here. I want to pull it up. Let's see. Actually, as a matter of fact, that is the end of my show here. Let me go ahead and switch us over to my desktop. So, Thomas, I'll wrap in about 60 seconds. Just going to fire out this really quickly. This is a screen share. These are what I call long-range ensembles. They're a 45-day ensemble. That's the key here, 45 days. And if any of you out there are weather enthusiasts or, you know, follow the weather, follow us closely here at News 6, you know that most of the time we don't like to go beyond 3 to 5 days. So the reason I like to look at these 45-day spaghetti plots, it might be a little difficult for you to see where you're watching from. That's good. The key takeaway here is we use a tool like this to look way into the future, just to know as we go week by week where we should watch for ingredients to come together for tropical activity as we round out the hurricane season. And in conclusion, Western Caribbean, just like that Climate Prediction Center chart I showed you all, Western Caribbean is going to be the area that we'll have to just monitor to see if things get better or worse to provide the opportunity for a tropical cyclone to form. Nothing out there immediately. This is an interesting graphic, very colorful, very complicated. Easiest way to explain it is it shows where the air is rising and where the air is sinking. The blues and the teals where it's rising, the reds and the yellows where it's sinking. Not good for thunderstorms, rising good. So here, alongside the GFS, the American model, and the European model, we're tracking that closer to Halloween and maybe the first 2 weeks of November, the Atlantic could get a little bit more favorable for one last bout of tropical activity before we finally say bon voyage to 2024. No guarantee that there will be any more tropical systems out there. Milton could possibly be the last one if 94L can't get its act together. But regardless, as we close out this weather segment, the Pinpoint Weather Team is going to keep you closely watched and keep you closely updated on anything we may think looks suspicious out there across the Atlantic. Back to you, Thomas.
Oh, thank you. And, just to drive that point home a little bit, we're going to worry about this so you don't have to. And, not even necessarily to say worry, that's just, maybe even not the right word. You guys are going to be looking at those tea leaves that are out there, those long range forecasts, those things that might pop up that could cause something, just so that we can be abreast and stay on top of any potential issues. Not that there will be some.
Exactly. There's no guarantee. And that's one of the kickers I want to conclude with on a positive note. I know I kind of wrapped up the discussion with, hey, between this and this, tropical action. No, all I'm saying is that's when we could see some ingredients come together to support a tropical system. Doesn't mean we're going to get one. 2024 has proved to us that whether you're in peak season or not, just because you got hot water, moisture, doesn't always mean you're going to get named storms. That's just going to be the time frame that us here in News 6 we're going to be monitoring before we have to get the word out if there's anything coming. But right now we are sitting crystal clear in terms of the tropics.
That's fantastic news. And, I think that also I'll close out by saying, don't listen to TikTok. TikTok isn't a certified meteorologist like Jonathan Kagas, like David Nazario, like Chief Meteorologist Candace Campos and the whole Pinpoint Weather Team. These are the people who have done the work, who are doing the work day in, day out to keep you informed. And when there's something to worry about, they will tell you.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself, my friend.
All right, David. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your insight and your in-depth knowledge in all things tropics and weather. And we'll probably see you again, I'm sure, in the coming days. But thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely, Thomas. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime. And thank you all for joining us as well here on Take 6. That'll do it for today. Be sure to tune in at 4 for the rest of our newscasts. We will have all your breaking news, weather, anything else you need to know to finish off your day. Of course, Lewis Bolden's story on election integrity, his first piece of 3, will be airing tonight at 6. And then at 7 o'clock right here on News 6 Plus, you will be able to see much more of that conversation with the supervisors of election from across Central Florida. We will have all that coming up later today. Be sure to stick around. And again, we'll be starting at News 6 at 4. Thank you again for your time, and I hope that you all have a pleasant day.